In 1840, the average American family was made up of 6 people. 1 in 5 white children died in infancy. In Black families, the mortality rate was 1 in 3. Given the many possible threats to the welfare and safety of children, their passage into healthy adulthood could be considered a remarkable achievement.
Fragile mortality was familiar to most growing families, but the acceptance of death did not mitigate the suffering it caused. People mourned privately or in community with their houses of worship in every state across their divided nation. How could the proximity of death be any more intimate in their lives?
The answer would come with the Civil War, when in the space of 4 years, at least 620,000 of America's former children would kill each other. The many people who struggled to forge a language to make sense of this loss would include a president, a poet, and a Brooklyn minister.
In 1855, in the immediate vicinity of First Presbyterian Church, was a small print shop on Fulton Street, now Cadman Plaza, where an itinerant typesetter self-published a collection of his own verse. The slim volume, entitled Leaves of Grass, was anonymous, but adjacent to the title page was an engraved portrait of a young man. Only in the text of the poem did its author identify himself.
Walt Whitman, an American, one of the roughs, cosmos, disorderly, fleshly, and sensual. No sentimentalist, no stander above men and women, nor apart from them.
Walt Whitman was the son of a house builder and became a passionate observer of his fellow man. He roamed the streets of Brooklyn and Manhattan, which he called Mannahatta, retaining the word's Lenape origin, and fashioned his enthusiasm into verse. His boldly described love for other men, and later, his mournful rumination on war and its losses, all found expression in his work.
In the years leading up to the Civil War, Brooklyn and New York were in the grip of religious fervor. First Presbyterian Church was holding prayer services every morning. Religious communities wanted to make places for both the living and the dead among their flocks, and First Presbyterian was no exception. The church had purchased land in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, so whether one paid for a pew in the sanctuary or reserved a plot in the cemetery, they were secure in the knowledge that they would be covered.
Charles Robinson came to First Church in the spring of 1860, following the brief term of William Hogarth. Hogarth could not match the genius of his long-serving predecessor, Samuel Cox, nor did he possess the theatrical oratory of Plymouth Church's Henry Ward Beecher. Hogarth left Brooklyn for Detroit, and the new preacher was called. Robinson was a thoughtful and modest man who was devoted to the study of religious music. In the course of his lifetime, he would write or edit 21 hymn books, earning him the reputation as the David of the modern church.
But his relationship to his congregation changed with the advent of the war. The recent inventions of photography and the telegraph brought immediacy and visual clarity to the unfolding tragedy. But no technology could distill the human suffering involved. Robinson would learn this, as would his fellow Brooklynite, Walt Whitman. Robinson would preach 2 significant eulogies in his time at First Presbyterian, one for a fallen soldier, the other for a fallen president. Walt Whitman would draw from his experience as a volunteer nurse to the wounded and dying following the disastrous Battle of Fredericksburg, and later in the nation's capital. In his poetry, he imagined ghastly encounters on a nameless battlefield.
I saw the debris, and the debris of the slain soldiers of the war. But I saw they were not as was thought. They themselves were fully at rest. They suffered not. The living remained and suffered. The mother suffered, and the wife and the child and the musing comrades suffered, and the armies that remained suffered.
Whitman would later write,
Dearest comrades, all is over and long gone, but love is not over. And what love, O comrades?
Charles Robinson had attended to the faith conversion of 28-year-old James Green, who would go on to join the Union Army. He and his pastor set up a regular correspondence, with Green requesting religious tracts to distribute to his fellow soldiers. He saw himself both in service to God and to his country. As if to prove his point, he asked that Robinson send him more religious reading, along with a six-shooter.
Green fought bravely at the Battle of Bull Run and rose through the ranks. He later joined New York's 48th Regiment, and in July of 1863, he was ordered to lead the first assault on Fort Wagner, South Carolina. Confederate sharpshooters shredded part of his jacket, and one of their bullets struck Green's battle sword, bending it backward. The sword was marked with the words, First Presbyterian Church.
During his second assault on the fort, Green followed the 54th Massachusetts, the Union's first regiment of black soldiers. Both regiments breached the walls, but once inside, Green and hundreds of others were shot and killed. Green's body was stripped of its uniform and thrown in a mass grave. No portrait can be found of James Green, only a group photograph of his regiment. His image is lost to us now. In his eulogy, Robinson tried to console Green's loved ones and his church.
Time will in a measure help you. You will never cease to feel your loss. You will never lessen the affectionateness of your remembrance. But you will, by and by, be able to look calmly on these days of grief. Patriotism will come to aid in mitigating the sorrow. These times are historic.
During the years of his presidency, Abraham Lincoln had conscientiously written letters of condolence to the families of his fallen soldiers. He had experienced loss in his own life with the deaths of his sons, Eddie and Willie. Tragically, he had acquired a certain fluency in the language of grief.
But when the war came to a close and the exhausted country tried to gather its strength again, the unimaginable happened. Lincoln was shot on Good Friday and died early the next morning. Robinson, along with religious leaders across the country, instantly recast their Easter worship to offer eulogies instead. Most likely, Robinson labored all night before the Easter service. The shaken congregation packed the church.
I shall not attempt to conceal from you that I am shocked more than ever before. I do not know the meaning of this awful transaction. The feeling which rests on each mind and heart today is not a simple feeling.
Robinson spoke of his own confusion and anger and acknowledged that he, like everyone else, feared for the future.
We learned to know him well. He made us devout. Put a man on the busiest street corner and let him keep looking upward, and he will gather a crowd that will all be looking upward. So our president gave unaffected praise to God.
He described this God as a master sculptor, using his people as an artist would use different tools to shape their creation.
So God, carrying out his vast plans, assumes one man and lays aside another.
He called on his congregation to find where their own usefulness might lie. He concluded that on this tortured Easter Sunday, Lincoln was now
Far beyond the sound of battle, far beyond the turmoil of state, in the infinite realms of gladness, that troubled mind has found its rest.
First Presbyterian Church sought to repair its spirit through prayer and recollection. Whitman spoke of a belief in the seasonal reassurances of the natural world of planting and harvest time.
I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. Failing to fetch me at first? Keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stopped, somewhere, waiting for you.